The Super Nintendo has a bit of a mixed reputation when it comes to football games. For every undisputed classic, there are absolute stinkers that make you question if you even like football. As part of my ongoing series ranking the best retro football games console by console, it's finally time to take on Nintendo's 16-bit heavyweight. Now, growing up, the Snes in our house belonged strictly to my older brother, and he couldn't have cared less about football games. So aside from playing the Konami classics round at friends' houses, a lot of these titles were a completely new experience for me. To make up for lost time, I've spent the last few weeks wading through the Snes library so you don't have to, and today we're boiling them down to the definitive top 10. We're going to look at chaotic indoor arenas, bizarre arcade power-ups, and the games that genuinely revolutionised the genre. Just a couple of quick ground rules before we kick off. Firstly, I'm only looking at fully playable games, so no management sims. Secondly, to keep the list varied and save you from listening to me waffle on about the minor differences between yearly updates and versions, I've tried to limit things to just one entry per series. Rather than letting the same names dominate the list, I've simply chosen the single strongest title to represent each series. Let's get straight to it. These are the top 10 football games on the Snes. Kicking off our top 10 is Capcom's Soccer Shootout. Developed by Amax and released in 1994, this is the westernised version of Japan's J-League Excite Stage 94. You get a decent spread of options here: friendlies, an all-star game, a surprisingly deep training setup and a full season campaign. While it strangely omits a standard cup tournament, it does include an 8-a-side indoor mode for frantic non-stop action. Unfortunately, the team selection is incredibly sparse, offering just 12 international sides. This includes the utterly baffling inclusion of Great Britain, a team that outside of the 2012 Olympics hasn't actually existed, apart from a couple of exhibition games in the 40s and 50s. The graphics are functional and crisp, featuring large, well-animated player sprites, even if the overall presentation lacks the premium polish of an ISS title. It also introduces a rather dramatic 3D perspective exclusively for penalty shootouts, which is a nice touch. Audio-wise, it's a bit mixed. The menu tune sounds like it belongs in a beach hotel lift, and the matchday crowd noises lack any real atmospheric punch. On the pitch, it aims for a sweet spot between arcade action and simulation. The controls are snappy, featuring a charge-up mechanic for strikes, shoulder buttons to apply swerve, and even a dedicated foul button for aggressive body checks. You really have to earn your goals here. 16-bit goalkeepers are rarely this competent, meaning direct solo runs are largely useless. Success relies almost entirely on working the ball out wide and firing crosses into the box for headers or volleys. Capcom's Soccer Shootout brings some genuinely interesting ideas to the table, and the tight handling makes it a somewhat engaging experience. However, a painfully limited team selection and a relentlessly brutal, unchangeable difficulty curve keep it firmly at number 10. Taking the number 9 spot is Super Goal. Developed by Toes, a studio you may know better for Nintendo's Game & Watch Gallery series and various Dragon Ball titles. This hit the shelves in 1992. Depending on where you grew up, you might know it simply as Goal in the States, or Super Cup Soccer over in Japan. They did eventually release a sequel, but for my money this original entry is definitely the better of the two. The overall package is incredibly light on content. You're restricted to standard exhibition friendlies and a single Super Cup tournament, choosing from 24 unlicensed international sides. It completely omits deeper simulation elements like substitutions, player fatigue or weather conditions. However, you do get a surprising amount of freedom with the match settings. You can toggle offsides and fouls on or off depending on how lawless you want the pitch to be, and bizarrely you can set the match lengths anywhere from rapid 1-minute halves all the way up to a grueling real-time 45-minute marathon. Being a very early Snes release, the graphics suffer from a distinct 8-bit hangover, failing to properly utilise the 16-bit hardware. The performance can be noticeably choppy. Player sprites are essentially identical palette swaps, and the animations for players taking a tumble look completely unrealistic. On a positive note, the developers introduced a significantly improved camera angle compared to the NES original, making the action much easier to read. In terms of audio, the atmosphere is incredibly sparse and feels strangely detached from the action, relying on basic crowd cheers and unnatural sound effects for heavy strikes. There is also a highly repetitive musical track that loops constantly during the match. Though mercifully you are given the option to mute it. Stripping away strict realism, the game leans heavily into a pure arcade action style of football. While it was originally marketed as a high-speed thrill ride, it actually plays at a noticeably slower, more deliberate pace than many of its 16-bit contemporaries. That said, it still manages to feel quite fluid and accessible. The basic control scheme is simple, although scoring is a genuine challenge thanks to frustrating, stubborn goalkeepers, and matches can frequently devolve into a chaotic scrap with players seemingly running all over the place in all directions. While it is undeniably bare bones in terms of squads and game modes, that fluid arcade-style feel works well enough in short bursts. It is incredibly easy to pick up and play, which is always a plus. It is certainly nothing to write home about, and ultimately it's just a bit too chaotic and messy on the pitch to rank any higher, but it remains a decent enough retro kickabout. Taking the number 8 spot is FIFA 97. EA released this across almost every platform imaginable back in 1996, and I naturally assumed the Nintendo port, handled by Rage Software, the studio behind the Striker games, would mirror the brilliant Mega Drive FIFAs I grew up with. How wrong I was. Off the pitch, as you would expect with FIFA, you get an impressive licensing package featuring international squads and club teams from 11 different nations. You have your standard friendlies, leagues, playoffs and tournaments, but weirdly it strips out several excellent features found on the Mega Drive version. The ability to create custom teams, edit players or transfer players between teams are all entirely absent here, which is a real shame. Graphically, however, it is surprisingly impressive for an EA title of this era. You actually get fairly good player likenesses. The pitch looks highly realistic with a fantastic moving grass effect, and the frame rate remains remarkably smooth without any noticeable slowdown. Add in lively dynamic crowds and magnificent audio, including Des Lynam delivering one-word announcements for things like goals and corners.
Throw in.
And the overall presentation is genuinely top-notch. But then you actually kick off. It plays noticeably slower than its Sega counterpart and feels completely unresponsive. The player physics are clunky, making tackling a frustrating chore, and simply trying to control the ball is annoyingly difficult. Worse still, they introduced a power-up meter for passes and shots, meaning you're constantly being dispossessed before you can even release the ball. Even on the lowest difficulty setting, it is a brutally tough, messy experience. While the sheer volume of licensed teams, crisp presentation and immersive audio give it high replay value on paper, this version of FIFA 97 simply isn't fun to play today. It is a clunky, unresponsive, pale imitation of what 16-bit FIFAs can be. These games are vastly superior on the Sega hardware. Check out my top 10 Mega Drive football games video for more on that. Coming in at number 7 is World Cup USA 94. Developed by Tiertex and released just in time for the World Cup, this holds a fascinating place in gaming history. As the final time, a company other than EA held the official FIFA tournament license. That is, of course, until FIFA just put out that horrible looking game through Netflix. Anyway, back to World Cup 94. The completely icon-driven menus require a bit of deciphering at first, but buried underneath is a surprisingly sophisticated package. You get friendlies, training and a full World Cup campaign, complete with the brilliant option to swap in 8 non-qualifying nations to create custom groups. Where it really shines though is the tactical depth. It features a bespoke set-piece designer and a tactical editor where you can tweak exact player positioning based on whether you're attacking or defending. It's highly reminiscent of the classic Wib-Wob system for the Championship Manager 3 games. Finding that level of detail, stuff normally reserved for dedicated management games, in a 16-bit tournament tie-in game is genuinely staggering. In terms of graphics, it looks like a slightly zoomed in, more detailed take on sensible soccer. The graphics are basic but possess plenty of charm, bolstered by official tournament billboards, visible crowds and brilliant animated pop-up frames whenever the referee blows his whistle or your manager kicks off on the touchline. The audio is a fairly standard fare, doing just enough of decent crowd noise to keep the matchday atmosphere alive. Gameplay-wise, it delivers a high-speed, end-to-end arcade experience. The handling is fast, fluid and wonderfully responsive. By default, the ball glues to your feet, but you can dial down the control assistance in the options if you fancy a much steeper challenge. Scoring can be tricky at first, but once you figure out the ideal shooting angle inside the penalty box, the goals start flowing. While it is undeniably limited in terms of overall game modes and lacks real player names, that surprisingly deep tactical suite paired with genuinely entertaining fluid arcade action makes World Cup USA 94 a vintage tie-in. It is simple, fast and still holds up remarkably well today. Coming in at number 6 is J-League Super Soccer 95 GQ Stadium. Released in 1995 by Hudson Soft, the studio better known for the Bomberman franchise, this was an exclusive release for the Japanese market. As the title gives away, this is a fully licensed J-League exclusive affair. Everything is entirely in Japanese, requiring a bit of trial and error to navigate, but translating the menus reveals a solid offering. Friendlies, full leagues, all-star matches, tournaments and a much needed training mode. You can adjust the weather, tweak match speed, fiddle with basic formations and even select real-world stadiums, though the latter doesn't make a massive visual difference. The presentation is genuinely excellent. Player sprites are large, colourful and fluidly animated, and you can surprisingly toggle the camera between a traditional left to right broadcast view and an up and down perspective. But the audio is the real star here. Impressively, for the 16-bit hardware, it features digitised team-specific charts and an active voice announcer who calls out things like corners and free kicks. The controls do not feel natural right out of the box. There is a fairly steep learning curve, but once you spend some time in training, the highly responsive handling finally clicks. Stringing passes together feels nice, granting you plenty of freedom on the pitch. Just tread lightly in defence. The referee is incredibly strict on shoulder barges. I even managed to pick up a straight red for a seemingly innocuous challenge. Scoring is also immensely tough thanks to some superhuman goalkeeping. Once you overcome the initial awkwardness of the controls, it delivers a really enjoyable, fluid game of football backed by a stellar audio package. However, it is ultimately held back by its brutal difficulty, the language barrier and that highly specific domestic scope. Unless you are desperate for mid-90s Japanese club football, there are definitely better options to be found. Breaking into the top 5 is Hat Trick Hero 2. Developed and published by arcade giant Taito in 1994, this Japan exclusive release is the home port of their popular arcade cabinet, serving as a direct sequel to the original Hat Trick Hero, known over here as Euro Football Champ. You get a solid lineup of modes including friendlies, penalties, a World League and the bespoke Taito Cup. There are 24 international sides to choose from based on the 1994 World Cup finalists, though Taito quietly ousted South Korea to sneak Japan onto the pitch instead. The main menus are handily in English, but the squad details are all in Japanese. The game uses Mode 7 to tilt the pitch perspective, pairing a zoomed in camera with nice large player sprites. Beyond that, the visuals are fairly basic. Kits are plain blocks of colour and teammates look identical barring your squad's designated ace player. The matchday audio is a bit of a letdown, degenerating into an irritating continuous din rather than the genuine stadium atmosphere. The handling feels slow and weighty, yet deliberate and responsive. Its signature arcade feature is selecting an ace player before kickoff. Building up your power meter during a match allows you to pull off some special moves, the most important being a ridiculous super shot from your ace that flattens anyone in its path and guarantees a goal. Frustratingly, the execution inputs are never explained in-game, meaning the CPU will regularly blast these past you, while you struggle to trigger one yourself. I even went to the trouble of translating the instruction manual to find the button combination, and I still couldn't pull one off during my time with the game. Thankfully, you can toggle super shots off in the settings for a more grounded experience. But where's the fun in that? It is fascinating to see what an arcade titan like Taito did with a 16-bit football game. While the overall package sits on the more limited end of the scale, the power-up meter and special shots deliver a brilliant arcade-at-home experience, providing a highly original, larger-than-life approach to the game. With a solid suite of modes and a weighty, responsive feel on the pitch, it remains a genuinely fun kickabout that offers something refreshingly different. Taking the number 4 spot is Fever Pitch Soccer, known as head-on soccer in the States. Handled by Silicon Dreams, this Snes port arrived in 1995, just months after the Mega Drive version. The German release was even endorsed by Mario Basler. You're restricted to only exhibition or tournament modes using 51 unlicensed national sides. However, the tournament campaign is brilliant. As you win matches, you recruit exaggerated star players to build your squad, like a dedicated marker who sticks to opponents or a striker with an absolute cannon of a shot. Progress is sadly tracked via a painful password system, but 3 difficulty levels thankfully give you a solid foothold before the AI starts deploying its own superpowered stars and cranking up the difficulty. To my ears, this Snes port sounds noticeably better than the Mega Drive version, featuring excellent crowd noise and brilliant over-the-top sound effects. The isometric camera is wonderfully executed, giving a proper 3D feel to the cartoony player sprites. Best of all, wildly different pitch environments ranging from dry sand to absolute mud baths keep things visually fresh, punctuated by humorous animated pop-ups for goals and bookings. On the pitch, it is pure, unapologetic arcade action. Delivering frantic end-to-end matches, it honestly shares more DNA with Speedball than a traditional football sim. The referee lets almost everything slide, allowing players to essentially batter each other, which can be quite fun. The varied pitches genuinely affect the ball physics, adding to the arcade feel. The controls do take some getting used to, especially a slight delay when shooting that can get you tackled before you can get your shot off. But master the one-touch passing and shot curling and you're in for incredibly open, high-scoring thrillers. Its cartoony, larger-than-life approach definitely won't be for everyone, and it is undeniably limited in terms of standard modes. However, the unique team building mechanics, varied with pitch conditions and frantic arcade handling, offer something completely different for anyone wanting a wildly untraditional football game. And number 3 is World Cup Striker, developed by Rage Software in time for the 1994 World Cup. This is an enhanced update of the original 1992 Striker. Interestingly, while its predecessor was ported to just about every system you can think of, this specific version was a Snes exclusive, released in the States as Elite Soccer. While the international squad count was halved from 64 to 32, this version thankfully introduces real player names. You get a respectable spread of leagues, training and a World Cup mode, alongside edit options to tweak kits. The real standout, however, is the return of the excellent 6-a-side indoor mode, with rebound walls that keep the action frantic and constantly in play. You also get a great suite of pre-match options, letting you tinker with formations, pitch types and referee strictness. The presentation is a bit of a mixed bag. The action runs at a blisteringly fast, smooth frame rate, and the short pre-match national anthems are a lovely touch. However, the player models look a bit flat, and the fixed vertical camera makes attacking down the screen quite tricky, as you can't see what's ahead of your players. And be warned, the menus only have this one song on loop. Which goes from charming to highly irritating in record time. Once the game kicks off, speed is the defining characteristic. It is incredibly fluid and responsive, playing almost like a pseudo 2.5D sensible soccer. The controls are simple but deep, though your most effective attacking strategy is often just giving the ball to your fastest player and sprinting the length of the pitch. Long-range strikes are almost always saved, so scoring heavily relies on applying D-pad swerve to diagonal shots or tapping in rebounds. Just brace yourself for the difficulty spikes. Playing against top-tier nations like Brazil requires desperate defending and a healthy dose of luck. World Cup Striker is a bit of an anomaly. It brings brilliant technical improvements and real names to the table, yet strips away some of the original game's content. Still, it perfectly retains that rapid end-to-end chaos that made the Striker series so much fun, making it an absolute blast to play today. Taking the runner-up spot at number 2 is International Sensible Soccer World Champions Edition. Released stateside as Sensible Soccer International Edition, this is essentially an updated repackaging of European Champions Edition, launched to capitalise on the hype of the 1994 World Cup. While it features slightly fewer options than some of the other versions, the sheer amount of content here is brilliant. Alongside the dedicated World Cup mode, you get friendlies, full leagues, custom cups and the Maastricht Cup, which essentially serves as an unlicensed Euros. You can even take club teams through unofficial versions of the Champions League and UEFA Cup. It boasts a much larger team selection than the previous European Champions Edition, and while the game lacks an official license, it uses real player names. Of course, you also get those absurd custom squads made up of teams like zoo animals, sandwiches, ancient gods, and even a team made up of other Sensible Software games. Best of all, tournaments saved directly to the cartridge. It sticks to the developer's signature minimalist aesthetic. The tiny sprites and distant overhead camera prioritise pitch readability over flashy graphics. Despite the basic look, animations remain incredibly sharp and fluid, although the audio is purely functional, just whistles, basic crowd noise and the thud of the ball, and there's no match commentary. That zoomed out camera is absolutely vital for reading open space and tracking runs. On the pitch it ignores strict simulation in favour of pure lightning fast arcade fun. The minimalist controls are watertight and incredibly accessible, meaning anyone can pick it up and instantly start executing 20-foot sliding tackles and smashing in 80-yard screamers. However, the physics actively discourage simply sprinting with the ball glued to your feet. Success still relies heavily on one-touch passing and exploiting space. There is a slight learning curve and strict referees will ruthlessly punish sloppy challenges. But once you master the rhythm, everything just clicks. It doesn't feel dated in the slightest. It has a timeless pick up and play appeal that still feels incredibly fresh today. It's Sensible Soccer, you know exactly what you're getting. Classic, lightning fast, arcade action. While it doesn't offer anything drastically new on the pitch, the boosted team selection and extra tournament options make this the definitive version on the Snes. It's simple, no nonsense, and still a hell of a lot of fun to play. Now a quick disclaimer before we crown our winner. When I originally put this list together, the original International Superstar Soccer took the number 2 spot and Deluxe took number 1. Strictly speaking, that is the clinical ranking. However, because Deluxe is essentially a perfected, expanded version of that exact same engine, reviewing them back to back would have felt like repeating myself. So I'm grouping them together here and crowning Deluxe as our undisputed number 1. Released in Europe in early 1996 and known in Japan as GQ World Soccer 2 Fighting 11. This absolute masterpiece also made its way onto the Mega Drive and PS1. The feature set here is absolutely staggering. You get 36 international sides to choose from, and while they lack official licensing and rely on fictional player names, the sheer volume of things to do more than makes up for it. You get your standard friendlies, mini leagues, full international and European cups, complete with regional qualifiers, and a full World League. There is also a brilliant scenario mode that drops you into 12 scripted matches with varying conditions, tasking you with either defending a lead or mounting a desperate comeback. Throw in a penalty shootout mode, comprehensive training options including free kick and corner drills, plus a dedicated challenge mode to beat skill records, and the replayability is excellent. You even get 8 different stadiums that subtly alter the pitch and surrounding decor. Before kick-off, you can customise everything from the weather and time of day to referee strictness and match length. And if you really want to get into the weeds, there are surprisingly deep team management options for setting marking, formations and strategy, alongside a full edit suite to tweak individual player stats and kits. Looking at it, you'd swear this belonged on a completely different generation of hardware to every other game on this list. The graphics are bright, crisp and feature massive, highly detailed player sprites. Despite handling multiple players, a handy radar and heavy rain, the engine never suffers a single drop in frame rate or smoothness. Instead of generic clones, the players have distinct looks, paying homage to real stars, like Galfano sporting a Roberto Baggio-style divine ponytail, or Carboni rocking Fabrizio Ravanelli's iconic silver hair. The animations are bursting with personality. Players will writhe in pain after brutal tackles, argue with the referee, hold their heads in despair at yellow cards, or even get stretchered off the pitch. There are also brilliant specific touches like the classic Klinsmann dive celebration, or a player innocently shrugging to the crowd after completely clattering an opponent. The stadiums are modelled on real-world locations, including a Wembley-esque ground for England and a Maracanã replica for Brazil. The audio ties it all together beautifully, from the funky, hyper-infectious menu tunes and lifelike crowd noises, including samba beats for Brazil, to that highly memorable, enthusiastic announcer shouting phrases like, "Down the way." When it comes to the action, nothing else comes close. The on-pitch experience is amazingly fluid and perfectly responsive, featuring highly accurate physics that arguably trump some more modern football games. The passing is solid, shooting is brilliantly snappy, and you can apply curl to both crosses and strikes. Scoring is immensely satisfying, offering a massive variety of goals ranging from diving headers to hoofing the ball into the top corner from just inside the halfway line. The 5 levels of difficulty are beautifully weighted, scaling up from exceedingly easy at level 1 to brutally unforgiving at level 5. On those higher difficulties, the goalkeepers become incredibly tough to beat. Defending is just as entertaining, particularly the glorious shoulder charge, which is absolutely perfect for committing sneaky, off-the-ball fouls without the referee catching you. It is incredibly easy to pick up and play, yet offers enough depth to be wildly addictive. If we're completely honest with ourselves, the 2 ISS titles are light years ahead of every other game on this list. They pushed the Super Nintendo to its absolute limits by looking and sounding incredible. They are packed with varied modes to keep you coming back, and most importantly, they just feel so utterly superb to play. Nothing else comes close to the on-pitch experience here. Even today, these games feel amazing. Everything simply clicks into place. The ISS games didn't just set the bar for football fans, they were a massive wake-up call to the rest of the industry, showing exactly what a football game could and should be.
No foul. Long ball. Amazing kick. Blocked shot. He shoots. Good touch. Corner kick.
And there we have it, the top 10 football games on the Super Nintendo. It's fair to say the Snes was a bit of a mixed bag when it came to football games, but with the ISS games alone, it delivered some of the greatest sports experiences of the 16-bit era. I'd love to hear your thoughts though. Did your favourite make the cut, or is there a hidden gem that didn't make my top 10? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, catch you on the next one.